As a pianist, a composer, and an improviser, Herbie Hancock is obviously one of the biggest names in the post-bop era of American jazz. But as a musician who embraced technology, his influence spreads beyond jazz music into electronic composition, all kinds of forms of dance music, funk, and hip-hop. I think a lot of that influence can be traced back to a very fruitful time in Hancock's career in the early 70s when he was leading a six-piece group called the Mwandishi Band. Mwandishi was the Swahili word for the composer, which was a name that Hancock was using at the time. And he was really asserting himself as a guy who was going to sort of stake out an interesting space at the intersection of spirituality and technology. Perhaps the most fruitful of the Mwandishi recordings is the 1973 album Sextant, which includes a lot of electronic timbres with acoustic sounds that are more familiar to listeners of improvisational jazz. By kind of doing both at the same time, Hancock was really exploring sort of the outer reaches of his creativity, while at the same time foreshadowing a commitment to the groove that he would continue to explore. Hancock's time in the Mwandishi Band also coincides with his discovery of Nichiren Buddhism, which is something he still practices today. He was introduced to the idea from his bassist at the time, Buster Williams, who was chanting backstage before a show. Pretty soon the entire group was chanting backstage, and through this sort of collective exploration of their spirituality, found themselves more in tune on stage and listening to each other a little more carefully. That sort of openness that began with the Mwandishi Band is something that carried Hancock's music for 5 decades, and that sort of meeting place between the technological and the spiritual is really where some of his most high-impact work comes from.